Okay, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you all for being here. My name is Vanessa Martinucci. I'm the new director of the North Carolina State Crime Laboratory. I replaced Director John Bird, who retired earlier this summer. With us today, we have Attorney General Josh Stein, Representative Carson Smith, Winston-Salem Lieutenant Eric Montgomery, Monica Johnson Hossler, she's the Executive Director of the North Carolina Coalition Against Sexual Assault, and Krista Maiden, who is a sexual assault survivor. I would also like to welcome representatives of the National Sexual Assault Kit Initiative Training and Technical Assistance Program, the North Carolina Sexual Assault Kit Initiative Working Group, and the Forensic Biology section of the North Carolina State Crime Laboratory. I have been in the field of forensic science and DNA for almost 14 years. I have personally tested sexual assault kits and processed CODIS hits, and I have seen the tremendous impact that can be made. The North Carolina State Crime Laboratory is committed to ensuring that every sexual assault evidence collection kit reported to law enforcement is tested. Now I'd like to turn it over to North Carolina's Attorney General, Josh Stein. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. I hope you all get a chance to meet and engage with Vanessa. As she said, she's 1 month on the job here as the director of the State Crime Lab. I congratulated her on this incredible accomplishment. One month in, she's already getting it done. Her background in forensic science and DNA is critical because we have so much work to do here in North Carolina as it relates to testing DNA and sexual assault kits. I want to announce a major positive development in our criminal justice system. This morning, Governor Roy Cooper signed into law the Survivor Act. In January, along with my friend Carson Smith, he was there with us, and I think Monica was there as well, we unveiled the Survivor Act. The Survivor Act exists to do two primary things. One, to secure the funding necessary to eliminate the backlog of untested sexual assault kits once and for all, and two, to ensure that it never develops again in the state of North Carolina. It will bring justice to victims. It will get dangerous, violent criminals off of our streets. As you will recall, last year we announced the unfortunate realization that there were approximately 15,000 untested sexual assault kits sitting on the shelves of local law enforcement across North Carolina. Each kit represents a person who experienced an awful trauma and to whom we owe our utmost dedication to try to bring justice. And frankly, the state has not done right by those people till today. The Survivor Act will do two things. One, it will appropriate $6 million of critical funding so that we can outsource and test all of these untested kits in our state. And when we test these kits, we solve crimes. Second, it will make sure that the backlog never develops again. Law enforcement will be required within 45 days of receiving a kit from a reported sexual assault to forward that kit to an accredited lab. Even before the passage of the Survivor Act, the Department of Justice and the State Crime Lab have been hard at work aggressively testing these old kits. We secured $3 million in grant funding from the federal government and from the Governor's Crime Commission. With those funds, we have tested 904 kits to date, and those kits have led to 182 hits to a known individual on the CODIS database. That's approximately a 20% hit rate. Now, law enforcement is tracking down those leads and putting rapists behind bars. Testing old kits solves cold cases. It is that simple. In a moment, you're going to hear about a cold case turned very hot just this week out of Winston-Salem that illustrates this very point. Solving sexual assault kits is far too important for us to do anything less than our state's best effort. We need to send a clear message to survivors that the state of North Carolina cares about what happened to you. A clear message to rapists that no matter how long ago you committed your crime, we are coming for you. And to the public, that we will do everything in our power to keep you safe. That's what all the work we've done to date on this issue has been about. The Survivor Act today, the tracking system last year, the SACI working group that Vanessa just talked about, that's hard at work going across the state to every single law enforcement agency and doing account of what's going on in their evidence rooms. I want to thank Governor Cooper for signing this bill into law. I want to thank our legislative sponsors and supporters, Senators Warren Daniel, Danny Britt, Floyd McKissick, Kirk DeVere, Tom McGinnis, Michael Garrett, Valerie Fouché, and others. Representatives Carson Smith, who's here today and will speak momentarily, Jamie Bowles, Mary Belk, and Billy Richardson. They worked hard, and this bill passed both chambers unanimously. We should be incredibly proud of the work of our legislature. I also want to thank advocates like the Joyful Heart Foundation and the North Carolina Coalition Against Sexual Assault, and Monica will speak momentarily. Bills like this don't just happen because they're good ideas. They happen because there are dedicated, passionate advocates pressing us to do the right thing. And it's my honor that today the state of North Carolina is doing the right thing. Now I would like to bring forward Representative Carson Smith, not only a current legislator, but a former sheriff who has been very active partner and ally on working on this issue. Representative Smith?
As a few of you that may know me know from my comments on the floor, I'm going to be very brief. But I am going to start out with reading part of the bill, a very small part, the legislative intent. It is the intent of the General Assembly that every sexual assault examination kit reported to law enforcement in this state be tested and to eliminate the inventory of untested sexual assault examination kits located statewide. That's in the bill, that's in the law, since it has been signed. And I think it's very important to keep that in mind. That's what we went into this wanting to do, and that is exactly what I believe we've done. As the Attorney General said, I was sheriff for 16 years in Pender County prior to becoming a freshman this biennium in the North Carolina House. And I was actually got to be a part of the working group that several of us here over the past, it was actually last year, the bulk of the work was done. Secretary Eric Cooks with DPS actually headed up this group. It was representatives from the AG's office, DPS, law enforcement, both the Sheriff's Association, the Police Chiefs Association, and others. DAs were involved, victims' rights advocates and associations and organizations were involved, as well as others. Most of the meetings actually occurred right here in this building. And we all wanted the same thing. We wanted to get the kits tested, and we wanted to be sure we would never get backlogged again. And the work from that committee has been incorporated into this law. Fast forward, I did get sworn into the House in January of this year, and it was an honor for me to become one of the primary sponsors on this bill. We needed this process that we had just worked on in the law, but we also needed some money to make it happen too. So when I left the sheriff and went to legislating, I found a way to help get a little money coming this way. The legislator was able to do both of those. From the beginning, this has been bipartisan. We had, I believe, 55 co-sponsors. 4 primary sponsors, 55 co-sponsors. If you do the math, that's only about 2 more people we need to get the thing passed going into it with 59 votes. So absolutely, this has been bipartisan. As the Attorney General said, all the 4 votes were unanimous. And it's just great to see that. This final product has remained bipartisan. This law will lead to the arrest in cases that may have been reported years ago. This law gives us a process and the funding we need to go forward to ensure that all kits are tested. And this law lets victims know that we are doing all we can at the state level to help them find justice. I want to thank the AG for putting this together today. This is a very important day for North Carolina, for all of us, but especially the survivors. Thank you.
The city of Winston-Salem is one of the cities that has worked hardest to eliminate and reduce their backlog. And this week had a major development in a case, an old case, 26 years old, I think it was. And we are joined today by Winston-Salem Lieutenant Eric Montgomery, who's going to share this exciting development for public safety.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Montgomery. I'm a lieutenant with the Winston-Salem Police Department. I'm currently assigned to our Criminal Investigations Division. One of the units that I'm responsible for overseeing or managing is our Special Victims Unit, which conducts the investigations of sexual assaults. The Winston-Salem Police Department's Criminal Investigations Division has a section of detectives that specialize in the investigation of those sexual assaults committed against persons. Their investigations include, but are not limited to, juveniles as well as adults. And a sexual assault can be the most devastating thing to happen to any person. The resulting pain and trauma can last a lifetime. And our Special Victims Unit specializes in the investigation of these heinous crimes. During preliminary and follow-up investigations of sexual assaults, officers and detectives will encourage the victims to have the SANE kits done. The evidence collected sometimes can provide critical information to aid investigators in the arrest and successful prosecution of someone who sexually assaults another person. The Winston-Salem Police Department has maintained evidence in cases of sexual assaults many years beyond the occurrence of the crime. We've maintained evidence that at the time we did not have the ability to test. Years ago, DNA testing was new, somewhat limited, and very expensive, which limited our ability to test some evidence. Technologies exist today that allow us to be able to test those things that we preserved and maintained many years ago. We never know what new technology or information for an investigation might become available. We periodically go back and review evidence in older investigations to see if they might benefit from newer technology. The Winston-Salem Police Department constantly seeks opportunities like this, and we've been taking advantage of this program by submitting sexual assault kits for analysis for about 2 years now. We've participated in the STEMS program since 2018. So far, we have reviewed the evidence in over 300 cases and sent the kits to be tested, the oldest one being from 1986. Once again, technologies exist today to test evidence that we may have collected, preserved, and maintained many years ago. In some cases, detectives may have developed new information on investigations that began many years ago. In 1990, a woman reported to the Winston-Salem Police Department that an unknown man broke into her home and sexually assaulted her. The information at that time was very limited, making it difficult for us to develop a suspect in this case until now. Members of our Detectives Special Victims Unit submitted evidence in the case for analysis and developed a suspect in a crime committed in 1990. This investigation continued 29 years later and led detectives to the arrest of Mr. Horace Stokes, Jr. And if you would, allow me to read the press release that I sent out on in February. Shortly after midnight in January 1990, officers with the Winston-Salem Police Department were dispatched to 1639 Lincoln Avenue on a reported rape. Upon their arrival, the officers spoke with an adult female from the home. On the night in question, this adult female was in her residence with her 3 children, all of whom were under the age of 7. For purposes of this release, the information, the adult female, we'll just refer to as the victim. On the night in question, the victim reported to the officers that she was awakened by a male standing over her bed. The male was armed with a knife and had his face concealed. The victim reported that the male sexually assaulted her and then fled the residence. The case was referred to our Criminal Investigations Division for further investigation. No investigative leads were developed and the investigation was closed inactive May of 1990. Despite the closure of the investigation as inactive, the evidence gathered in the above-mentioned case was held and preserved. In 2017, the Winston-Salem Police Department was invited to participate in a program in which sexual assault kits could be submitted for analysis at a private lab. In December of 2017, the sexual assault kit collected as a part of this 1990 investigation was submitted for analysis. In August of 2018, detectives learned that pursuant to that analysis, DNA evidence was identified that led investigators to a suspect in this matter. The criminal investigation was reopened at that point and has since been active. On February 12, 2019, detectives obtained warrants for arrest for charging 58-year-old Horace Stokes Jr. with first-degree burglary and first-degree rape in connection to that investigation. Mr. Stokes remains in prison, in jail right now, awaiting trial under $1 million bond. Yesterday, I sent out another press release, and it reads like this: as was detailed in the previous press release in 2017, the police department was invited to participate in a sexual assault kit testing initiative. Since that time, detectives with the Winston-Salem Police Department Special Victims Unit have continued to follow investigative leads developed as a result of those laboratory tests. On December 17, 2018, the lab analysis of a submitted sexual assault kit led to a new investigative lead that began in 1993. On November 3, 1993, officers from the Winston-Salem Police Department reported to a rape of an adult female. We'll also refer to her just as the victim. On the night in question, the victim reported that an unknown man armed with a knife approached her as she walked along Cayuga Street. The man reportedly forced her to another area before he sexually assaulted her. The case was referred to the Criminal Investigations Division for further investigation. No investigative leads were developed, and the case was closed inactive on January 11, 1994. Despite the closure of the investigation as inactive, the evidence gathered in the above referenced matter was held and preserved in the evidence management section of the Winston-Salem Police Department. As a result of the new investigative lead and subsequent follow-up, on September 17, 2019, detectives obtained warrants for arrest charging 71-year-old John Henry Alford with first-degree rape, first-degree sex offense, and first-degree kidnapping. At the time these warrants were obtained, Mr. John Henry Alford was being held in the North Carolina Department of Corrections on unrelated matters. Mr. Alford remains in the Department of Correction under a $1 million bond awaiting for his trial. We are optimistic that taking advantage of this sexual assault kit initiative will result in other cases being reactivated and resulting in arrests in those cases. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Montgomery. That crystallizes the theory of what we're trying to do into real cases. Real people who suffered terrible crimes now have the opportunity to have justice. A wonderful development, and I thank you all and your diligence in trying to track these criminals down. Next, we will hear from Monica Johnson Hossler. She is the Executive Director of the North Carolina Coalition Against Sexual Assault. She has been side by side pushing to try to get this law into effect and many other laws into effect so that North Carolina has the criminal justice system we can all be proud of. Monica.
Thank you very much. It is indeed my pleasure as the director of the North Carolina Coalition Against Sexual Assault that represents over 70 rape crisis centers that serve all 100 counties. And I'd be remiss if I did not acknowledge our rape crisis center from Cumberland County sitting on the front row, who really propelled this along with Lieutenant Stubberndike from the Fayetteville Police. They catapulted what we talked about 20 years ago that needed to happen. And we are grateful that the legislature in North Carolina made a promise to survivors by passing this by creating a bill, and now the state of North Carolina is going to uphold the promise that we have all publicly made now that the governor has signed it. And I use that language very intentional to say the work that we do and that we advocate for across the state of North Carolina, both those who provide direct services, such as in Cumberland and in Wake County, who's sitting here with me today, they're the front lines. They're the people who talk to the survivors, who relay the message of where our laws currently fall survivors short. It is indeed our role to bring those concerns, gaps in laws and services to our General Assembly, to create a culture in North Carolina where we're clearly saying to people that we are not about just addressing the problem, which is what we're doing by addressing the backlog, but by calling this the Survivor Act, we are saying that we are actually going to prevent these things from happening, as you heard the Attorney General say. This is the beginning of many, many laws that I'd like to see passed in North Carolina to truly address where we currently can serve survivors, but most importantly, how do we create a culture that makes the promise that we are actually not going to allow sexual assault in our state. That is up to the people up here who have worked tirelessly to pass this law, to those of you who work every day in your communities to prevent sexual assault from happening. But most importantly, the narrative that we have all these cameras here is that the media has been an active participant in sharing the story and the promise across the state of North Carolina. And my job today is to thank you, each and every one of you, for your role in getting us to this place, and to remind you that I'll still be here to push you along on the laws where we still have gaps, because there is still work to do. And you'll hear that from the survivor. It changes their life forever. It changes our lives forever. It changes who our communities are when sexual assault happens. And most importantly, it changes who we are as a community when we don't address the problem as community members. So I am grateful for the work that we are doing in North Carolina, and I will continue my fight to push North Carolina to be better and to do better by survivors, and let them know that we intend to uphold our promise. Thank you.
I'd like to recognize good friend, District Attorney Billy West of Cumberland County. And Monica is right. Lieutenant Summerdike, the advocates from Cumberland and Mecklenburg County were the first two counties to secure, we say SAKI, it's Sexual Assault Kit Initiative. It's a federal program. And they have been the leading jurisdictions in eliminating their backlogs. And I believe Fayetteville has none. Am I correct? They're down to zero. And Mecklenburg's almost down to zero. And they were the model for us at the Department of Justice to say, this needs to happen across the entire state of North Carolina. So, Billy, thank you for being here. We will next hear from Krista Maiden, who is a survivor. And she is going to bravely come forward and give voice to her story, but hers is one. 15,000 untested sexual assault kits in North Carolina. Each is its own story. And Krista, we are so grateful that you're telling yours.
Hello, my name is Krista Maiden. I'm a survivor of a sexual assault that took place in June of 2015 near Uptown Charlotte. As soon as I could get away from the man who assaulted me, I called the police, and they transported me by ambulance to the hospital where a sexual assault nurse examiner completed my rape kit. 2 years later, in June of 2017, my detective called and asked me to come to the police headquarters so they could review the results of my rape kit analysis. 2 years after my assault. That's 726 days to be exact. I would like to say that the man who assaulted me was confirmed by a DNA match and arrested that day, but that is not what happened. Instead, I was told by detectives it's not him. On top of that, I was told there was a second unknown DNA profile that appeared in my kit, a profile that I had absolutely no explanation for. 9 months later, in March of 2018, my detective would call and tell me that there had been a mistake and that the man who sexually assaulted me, did match the DNA found in my kit. But there was still no explanation for the second unknown profile. After that, the man was arrested and indicted on 3 counts of first-degree sexual assault and 1 count of assault by strangulation. Ultimately, the unknown male DNA profile would play a major role in the DA's decision to dismiss my case 3.5 years after I reported it. And the man who assaulted me is free and walking among us today. By signing this bill, the Survivor Act, the state of North Carolina is now showing me that they are in fact standing up for survivors. So survivors like me will not have to wait for 2 years. to hear the results of their kit analysis, that survivors like me will not have to deal with the issues of kit contamination. Each of these boxes represent a tragic and traumatic event. They represent a human being. They are one of the keys to justice. On behalf of sexual assault survivors, thank you to all of the bill's sponsors, the North Carolina Coalition Against Sexual Assault, Attorney General Stein, Governor Cooper, for hearing our cries for justice as we are all seeking conviction. Thank you.
And to the media, you can address questions to anyone. Unfortunately, no. This problem, which is grave in North Carolina, is not unique to North Carolina. Other states, other cities, other counties across the country also have a backlog. Lieutenant Summerdike and I were just on a panel with one of the companies, the private vendors that do this work, and they said that they are just jam-packed with kits from all across the country. But now that we have this funding secured, we can negotiate with them to try to increase their capacity. But the fact of the matter is it will take a few years before this backlog is eliminated. And we wish it could be faster. It's just a function of capacity. Sure. Happy to address both of those. First, as it relates to the tracking system, this was something that we went to the legislature last year in 2018. Thank you. We wanted authority to implement a tracking system, and the legislature supported us, and we thank them for that. And on October 1st of 2018, that tracking system went into effect, so that every sexual assault kit that is collected since that date has had a barcode. And the concept is simple. When you get a package from UPS, you know exactly where it is. When you order a pizza from Domino's, you know what block it is on. Victims who submitted their evidence for analysis in these kits, they would give over the evidence and they would have no idea whatever happened to their evidence. Where is it? Is it at the lab? Is it at the police department? Is it at the sheriff's office? So the victim is given the barcode at the time of producing the evidence so that they can then follow up on that kit thereafter. And that transparency will create greater accountability on all of us. And that's a good thing. As it relates to the 15,000, charges have not been brought in all of those cases. And some of them, there may be reasons why not to actually do the test. That's one of the part of the Survivor Act, and Representative Smith, if you want to address this, you can, is that each jurisdiction is to create a committee of stakeholders, people who are very intimately involved in this. They will then go and analyze what's in the closet and prioritize which kits should be tested in what order, so that because it's going to take us some time to get through them, we want to get the highest priority ones done first. And if there's some reason why a kit shouldn't be tested, they can make that determination at that time. But our intention is to test all of the kits, or as close to all of them as possible. And this is what the kits actually look like, and there's the barcode. And every kit has this now in North Carolina. And what our SACI, one of the things we used our SACI grant money for was there's a team of people, about a dozen, spread across North Carolina, going police department by police department, sheriff's office by sheriff's office, in inventorying what's in the office and applying these barcodes to the old ones, so that it's not only on the kits as of October 1st forward, but we want to make sure every kit in the system has one. Carson, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Not much. You actually got it right on. We think it was very important, both the working group and the legislature when it got to us, to be sure we got the ones that have the highest percentage of a chance that you're likely to find somebody who's committed a crime, get those tested first. So each jurisdiction will be setting up those, and it's in the legislation, setting up those committees to go through them so that they can get the ones we think we can reap the most benefits from the quickest, get them tested, but to eventually test all of them that are reported.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, it is something that, I mean, law enforcement has a number of rules by which they have to comply, and it will be on them to adhere to those rules. And all of us in the criminal justice system will be looking over everybody's shoulder, and we are going to all hold each other accountable in this process. All right, thank you all very much.